All right, finna go ahead and get started. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of a Champ podcast, episode number 74. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about how to be better with speech as well as how to be a better conversationalist. It's not exactly in that order, but um, yeah, so we're going to go getting started. Just to start the podcast, if you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you leave a like on this video. Also, make sure you go ahead and follow my TikTok. My TikTok is Life of a Champ podcast. I post clips on there every single week, so make sure you stay tuned in for that. I post some new clips today, as well as make sure you like my YouTube shorts as well. I'm posting those every week, like I had mentioned. Other than that, does anything else I have to tell you guys? I think I'm good. Also, if there's any other tips that you have for the people when it comes to being a better conversationalist or to be better within speech, I'm gonna break the podcast up into two different sections. The first section is going to be how to be a better conversationalist, and the second is going to be how to be better in speech in general. Which I do believe people need to focus on speech because most people are lacking on speech, which I'll explain later on. But that's how I'm gonna go ahead and get it started, right? So how to be better at conversation, right? This is a question that I get all the time, and because most people they lack the social skills, quite frankly, right? This is going to look like honestly just thinking out conversations. This is something that I've done and I've tried many times, and I do many times, right? I think about conversations and how deep they can get, right? And I feel like what's most important when it comes to being good at conversation, you have to be able to observe other people and see how they make conversation, right? One of the biggest key points that I took away from being pretty decent at conversation. If you talk to me, I'm pretty decently good. It's okay. It's okay, Emily. Not everybody's socially gifted, but like I said, a lot of people need to develop the skill. So yeah, for sure. But a lot of it comes down to hold on, give me a second. My bad. A lot of it comes down to I'll explain that later. I'll explain that later, KJ. A lot of it comes down to asking the right questions because if you ask the right questions, it's going to be able to reap the most benefit when it comes to um, getting to know somebody. And getting to know somebody is the entire point of having the conversation and having an intriguing conversation. So I would recommend you cultivate a list of intriguing questions. So if I could give you some examples of these questions, which I have some written down, I don't have them exactly with my notes, but this is going to be things like, hey, what are things that you're passionate about? What is your opinion on this topic? Um, yeah, basically getting to know them. Like, what are certain habits that you have? What are certain hobbies that you're interested in? Right, certain things like that are going to be able to reap a lot of benefit when it comes to asking the question, and you'll get to know the person a lot quicker than if you were to ask questions like, "Oh, how was your day? What did you do today?" Things like that. Right. Try to stay away. Try to stay away from the most basic questions. Like people that I talk to on the daily, we don't really get into those basic conversations. I feel like those, for the most part, just more filler conversations, and they're not exactly essential conversations that are really needed. So they can be avoided. Like the people I talk to most, I'll never ask, "Hey, how was your day?" I'll never ask that question. Our conversations are too advanced for that, and I get to know people very quickly. That is an observation that I made with myself within the last probably a year and a half. I'm able to get to know people very quickly. People are able to really get comfortable with me within the first maybe let's just say three interactions, um, and also within conversation and text. I've been told many times that um, just having conversations with me allows for people to get to know themselves better because I ask them very interesting questions that maybe even some questions that they never even asked themselves before. So I feel like that is definitely very important um, when it comes to conversation in general, right? All right. One thing I want to mention with conversation, which I feel like is very relevant, with being a good conversationalist, you need to be able to think these things through, like I kind of had mentioned, but I feel like a lot of people lack the ability to think on their own and have their own thoughts because they're so consumed with the day to day life, and not only consumed within the day to day life, they're just consumed with just an abundance of content. Right? They have too much content that's being forced down their throat, really, and their thoughts are not even their thoughts. So I would recommend um, doing any way you think is reasonable to stay off of consuming people's content as much as you possibly can, and let your thoughts come to you organically. That is going to make you a better conversationalist. Obviously, being up to date with social situations is definitely very good when it comes to trying to initiate conversation, but at the same time, at what cost, man? Because like I said, your thoughts are not even going to be your own thoughts. You're having people pretty much create your own reality based off of consuming some content, and that content becomes your thoughts. And sometimes some of those pieces of content are not even relevant to your life, so it's really not really going to do anything for you. So, like I said, don't consume too much content, and like I said, let your thoughts come to you organically. One thing when it comes to being a better conversationalist as well, which this is going to be not the best advice that you guys want to hear, but I'm going to tell you anyways because I feel like it's super relevant when it comes to conversation in general. This is going to be become a better listener. The people that are the best listeners are honestly the best conversationalists because you'll be able to see, you'll be able to be observant of a person's behavior, and I feel like it'll be able to reap more benefit when it comes to asking better questions or asking more detailed questions. So be an observer, be a better listener, and that's also going to help you with building conversation because it's not going to be something where you exactly have to grab conversation out of thin air. There's going to be more like I said, it's going to be more applicable to the conversation if you're able to observe and listen to somebody. You can kind of like I said, single out certain types of topics and things like that, or certain types of interests, right? So that is definitely one of my pieces of advice that I would recommend for sure. Become a better listener. Um, and one thing I want to mention as well, which this is something that I've observed and something that everybody realistically knows, but nobody really applies or intentionally applies within conversation, is most people like to talk about themselves, right? So just keep asking questions, right? But there's one thing I want to mention. Do not ask questions in like an interview form because I feel like a lot of people do that, and it's not exactly the best thing for you because people feel uncomfortable when they have a lot of questions that are coming at them. So try to be a little bit more casual, but when the conversation starts to die out a little bit, feel free to ask a question because that is going to be the best time you possibly can is when the conversation is dying out, right? That's how you're going to get them more intrigued. That's how you're going to grip their attention a little bit better is when you start to ask questions. But like I said, most people like to talk about themselves. So when it comes to first initiating a conversation with somebody, be sure to ask, I would say roughly maybe 3 questions that you think about thoroughly. These questions could be the same questions that you talk to everybody about, but just 3 questions that you get to know somebody a lot more just by asking those questions. So that's what I would recommend for sure. Another thing with initiating conversation and becoming a better conversationalist. This is one thing I want everybody to pay attention to. Understand when you're doing most of the work and carrying the conversation, right? This happens. This happens to a lot of men. This is my observation, right? This happens to a lot of men, and they don't know if they're exactly interested in the conversation. Let's just say men and women, right? I'm not, that's the kind of the terms I'm speaking, right? A lot of men will try to carry conversations with a woman that they find attractive, and I feel like that is not good. That is not good because either one, she's not interested, or two, she's not a good conversationalist herself. And either of those options, in my opinion, are good enough for you to step away from the conversation. Because, like I said, either she's not interested or she's just not good at making conversation. I personally want to have conversations with people who are good at making conversation and good at keeping up with conversation and who ask questions themselves, right? So understand when they're not interested. If you're doing most of the work, you shouldn't be doing most of the work. It should be a 50-50 battle when it comes to conversation. And if it's not a 50-50 battle, then, quite frankly, like I said, they're just not as interested as you think that they might be. And that is completely okay. Just try to have conversation with somebody else who's actually, you know, better at having conversation or who's more interested in trying to have conversation with you. So yeah. Next piece of advice that I have. This is going to be an obvious one, but I feel like it still needs to be mentioned, right? There's people that have social anxiety and things like that, and that definitely needs to be recognized. And I wouldn't say that's not okay, but what I will say is you definitely need to intentionally try to step out of your comfort zone a little bit more. So this is going to be having more conversations and just becoming more social when it comes to um, just basic interaction. So this doesn't even need to be with somebody that you know too well. Just um, with try to create conversations with just the random strangers, right? Just say little things, even if they're not the most meaningful conversations. Just being comfortable enough with yourself and with other people that you can ask or that you could just, like I said, just have basic conversation, right? I feel like as recently I see myself as I improve my speech, improve my conversation skills, I'm a lot more able to just have what do they call those? I wouldn't say they're superficial conversations, but they're just like I said, they're just your normal basic conversations with people that are just random, right? But I feel like those conversations are definitely very, very important. And as of recently, I've sought them out a little bit more than I typically would because I just, like I said, I value those things. And at first, I really didn't value them because I didn't think they had really had any utility. But as of recently, I started to value them more. And if you know me in my personal life, if you've observed me within a social setting, you see that I'm a little bit more social when it comes to that. And like I said, it definitely reaps a lot of benefits. And you can kind of control the situation a little bit more because if you want to have if you want to have like a conversation, just chop it up a little bit and dead it right there, you can dead it right there. If you want to go deeper into the conversation, you obviously can. So that is also very, very good. Um, Another thing that I would recommend when it comes to having conversations and becoming a better conversationalist is definitely have conversations with people that are genuinely better than you at having conversation because um, it'll allow you to observe how people conduct themselves within conversation. And it is kind of weird to I have kind of conflicting advice because of one, you need to be present within the conversation, but two, you also if you're intentionally trying to be better at conversation, I feel like you should be looking out for certain things and trying to observe certain things and try certain things within conversation. So if you can balance between staying present in the moment and trying to be an observer and trying to better your speech intentionally, if you can find a healthy balance, that's something I would definitely recommend for sure. And like I said, having conversations with people that are better than you in conversation is also just a good time in general, right? Part of the reason why I wanted to make this podcast is to interact more, not only to better my skills, but to also have, like I said, genuine, great conversations, which I've definitely had plenty and plenty of times on here as well. Um, my next piece of advice is to become a better become a better conversationalist. Is to understand social cues, have eye contact, and body language. Pay attention to all these things, because it's one thing to have a conversation like through text or through FaceTime and things like that, but it's another thing to have a conversation, obviously in person, right? And that's different because it's a lot easier to have a conversation with somebody who's with over text or on FaceTime than it is to have a conversation with somebody in person. Oh my gosh! But you need to pay attention to little social cues to make sure that the interaction is going exactly how you think it's going, right? So be observant of those things. Also, be able to make eye contact. And a lot of people struggle to make eye contact. It makes them feel uncomfortable because they're just not. Because I think it's because they're not as confident as they think that they are. And if you're not able to maintain eye contact, I'm not saying be weird and like stare at them. I'm saying like like occasionally look at them in the eye, right? If this is not something that's in your bag when it comes to conversations, you're lacking. You're just lacking, and it's okay. But first, you need to recognize that you're lacking, and second, you need to go ahead and intentionally try to make that a better point. A lot of people recognize their weaknesses and don't do anything about them. Right? I'm a person who observes all my weaknesses and tries to better them specifically and intentionally. And if you're watching this, this is something that I wish for you to intentionally try to make those little adjustments so you're a more well-rounded person. And like I said, I don't understand personally any person that doesn't try to do that because I take life serious, and there's a lot of people that don't take life serious, which you do you, I guess, but at the same time, I take life serious. So that's just the way I see life personally. All right, the next thing with becoming a better conversationalist is to just think things out, man. I keep saying these things because a lot of people do not have certain things like their values written out, right? I'm a person who has my values written out. I'm a person who has some of the beliefs that I have written out. And yeah, that with become a better conversationalist, just write things out, man. Write things out. You wouldn't think that writing is going to help you with conversation, but writing is going to help you with thinking in general, because writing is just an extension of thought, and thought is obviously you need thorough thoughts and well structured thoughts to have a good conversation. So write things down, understand where your values lie, understand what beliefs you have. I feel like a lot of people are really not opinionated, and I feel like the best people who are really good at conversation are going to be the ones that are going to be a little bit more opinionated than a person who's not, um, because they have established beliefs. It's one thing to be able to have a conversation. It's another thing to be able to take a stance on something and stand for something. Some people see it as a negative. I personally don't see it as a negative. As long as you do your time to actually think things out thoroughly, to evaluate both sides and not just only take one side because you think it's the right side. Um, like I said, evaluate whether are you actually really about this side, or are you just kind of like going with what other people say, right? I feel like that's something that's hindering as well to conversation. You need to make sure that this is a strong stance that you can take, and if somebody were to challenge you on it, this is something that is also really key when it comes to having your beliefs. If somebody were to challenge you on it, you have some foundation to lay back on and to be able to, combat them if they need to be combated, right? Obviously, I'm not in an argumentative way, but I'm saying, if they have a lack of understanding of where you're coming from, you need to be able to explain to them, because that's going to be able to make for better conversation in general, right? A little bit more of a different type of conversation, but at the same time, it's still going to be productive conversation. Oh my God. All right. The next thing is for my advice. Kind of already explained that one a little bit. All right. This is going to be a little bit of a different type of advice, and I'm sure not many people have actually been given this advice when it comes to being a better conversationalist. But observe things in life as if you had to teach it to somebody else, right? So let me tell you how this is going to really apply to conversation. If you're able to, like I said, okay, learn something, right? Or observe something within society and you're able to explain it back thoroughly, it's going to make you better at conversation, right? This is something that I'm about to do right now with KJ's question. KJ asked me, how was the Jordan B. Peterson seminar? I'll tell you right now in a second. But yeah, just trying to take it from that stance, right? A lot of people do not view life as that, right? That is something that I had to intentionally try to do. Whenever I'm learning something or whenever I'm trying to, like I said, become better at conversation, I look at it from the frame of, if I had to teach somebody how to do this, which is something that I'm doing right now, how would I explain it? How would I think it out? I would think it out slightly different. Shout out to Anthony. I would think things out slightly different, but at the same time, like I said, how would you go about it? Because you're going to need to pay attention in a different type of way, right? You're not even paying attention just to learn or just to consume. You're paying attention to teach, and that allows you to pick up on certain key points and allows you to observe from it with a different focus. And I feel like that's very, very important when it comes to trying to bring it up in the conversation as well. All right. Another thing that I'm going to mention, which, like I said, not a lot of people are going to talk about when it comes to trying to be a better at conversation. This is going to be something that I've done, and I didn't think I needed to do, but something that, as I matured, I thought about it, and it definitely needs to be applied for sure. Like I said, most people won't give you this advice. This is going to be understanding what conversations to avoid with certain people, right? You don't want to be the most controversial person. That's for sure, right? Nobody likes somebody who has just unpopular opinions and only expresses their unpopular opinions, and somebody who's argumentative and somebody who's disagreeable all the time, right? Nobody's going to enjoy being in the presence of somebody like that, right? So there's going to be, certain conversations and certain opinions that we all have that are going to be deemed as controversial, right? At the very least, you should have some controversial opinions. You should have some unpopular opinions. Everyone should have these. If you don't have them, you're listening to what everybody tells you, and I don't think that's exactly in your best interest all the time, right? So that being said, understand what conversations to avoid with certain people. This is something that I had to do because I recognized a certain pattern of where, let's just say I was interacting with somebody and a certain conversation got brought up, or I intentionally tried to have the conversation because I just genuinely liked having that conversation. And let's just say it didn't go the best way that it possibly could. So I just stopped altogether with having that conversation because I don't want somebody to have a misconstrued perception of me based off of one opinion. And I feel like a lot of people, they have one opinion and that it's contrary to another person's opinion. And they would just rather not even have the conversation at all. And I feel like that's very, very interesting as well. So let's just say, for example, I'll give you an example that is really, really popularized within society right now. And then if you have conflicting views, for whatever reason, you just don't like each other, I just think that's absolutely ridiculous and very, very childish. It's not very adult-like, but it's going to be something like the political debate, right? Let's just say somebody's a Democrat, the other person's a Republican, right? Nowadays, if you have a difference in view of political view, oh my God, I just don't want to associate with that person. I don't want to talk to that person. Whatever. See, there's certain conversations to avoid. Maybe that's one of them. Let's just say you're a very, very very strong Republican, right? You're a very, very strong conservative, right? maybe taking that away from conversation, even though it's going to be, it's going to apply in certain situations and you can't completely avoid it, but maybe there's certain situations where you just need to hold your tongue because you have controversial opinions and you know that it can affect some of the ways that you interact with somebody, and whether that person deems you to be likable or not. And maybe you're trying to be likable to this person, right? There's certain ways you need to act, and there's certain conversations that you need to retract from having. And I feel like that's important right there. So, like I said, for example, I'll tell you guys a little bit about. I'm not gonna tell you the specifics, but I'll let you know kind of the way I apply that to my life, right? So there are certain conversations that I had with women that I talked to, right? And let's just say, like I said, the conversation just didn't go that great, right? I had a let's just say controversial view, and get them out the chat, man. Get them out the chat, man. Get them out the chat, man. Get them out. Let's just say, get them out the chat, G. Yeah, let's just say that there was I seen a pattern. I seen a pattern. I talked to a few women, and then I seen um it wasn't exactly exactly a desirable conversation with that person, and they were just kind of turned off by that conversation. So I said, let's just say that is my view. I just need to get rid of that and not have it in conversation. And if it comes up, I won't be the one initiating bringing it up. That'll be something that is done on that person's part. And like I had mentioned as well, when it comes to having conversation, you need to set boundaries as well. So one of these things is I'm a person who believes in 100% honesty. If you ask a question, you need to prepare for the answer. So that is something that I established on very, very early on within the conversation. Um, because, like I said, I'm gonna let you know I'm gonna keep it 1,000 always. But if you're not prepared to hear the answer, just don't ask the question. So that is something that I also would recommend people do. Um, and hopefully that's gonna avoid some of the negative potential negative that come out of the conversation. Um, Another thing I would do to become better at conversation is to talk about certain things and certain problems that you see within conversations as well. So, for example, right, when it comes to me dealing with anybody, right, certain people more than others, right, but let's just say I have an observation of most interactions you have with somebody. Eventually, there's going to be a problem that comes up, but it's not about when it comes up or how it comes up. It's about understanding that it will probably come up eventually. But how exactly should we go about the problem? I feel like that is something that people need to really key in on as well when it comes to becoming a better conversationalist is handling conflict, right? Most people are not very good at handling conflict. They observe that it is a problem that is recurring in a lot of interactions, but they do not take the steps necessary in the form of preventing those certain situations from happening. So me, for example, I use this specifically when I talk to women, right? This is one of the conversations that I have with them. So I'll be like, um, I understand, me and you are on good terms right now, right? And I would like this interaction to be very, very thorough and very, very good all the time, as much as it possibly can be. But we need to both understand that eventually there's going to be a problem. It's not if, it's when, right? Specifically, it's eventually going to happen over time. Okay. So with that being said, and then I asked them, how would you like to go about that problem? How would you like to go about those issues? And we have a discussion, right? And that discussion is very, very important, and it creates a stronger foundation for the interaction itself. And like I said, that was all. That's gonna help you become a better conversationalist because you're going to be able to initiate a conversation that is in the best interest of the entire interaction in general. And I feel like nobody does that except me. I haven't heard anybody do that except me, personally. So having those little boundaries or little I wouldn't even exactly call them like check a box in conversations. It's just going to make the interaction more thorough. But I appreciate that, KJ. Um, yeah, another one I'm going to mention. Another tip for being better at conversation is just going to be being present and in the moment when you're speaking to somebody. I feel like some people can tell when your mind starts to wander, or let's just say they get distracted with their phone. I feel like a lot of people can sense these things. So, to make them as most comfortable as they possibly can feel, as well as to not have a misconstrued perception of you, you need to make sure that you are in the moment and present in the moment. At the very least, do it as much as you possibly can, because if you don't, it's gonna be a little tough. It's gonna be a little tough for like I said, them to really maintain wanting to have a conversation with you, because like I said, if I talk to somebody and they're distracted, right, I'm gonna be like, well, what the hell am I even wasting my breath for? There's just no point, right? So understand those situations and like I said, go about them the best way you possibly can. Um, Yeah, so I'm going to go over all that I had mentioned when it comes to being better at conversation. And then the second part of the podcast I'll get into as well, which is going to be just better at speech in general. So my advice is most people don't have their own thoughts and they consume too much content and they just spew out exactly what they consume. What you need to do is consume content intentionally. Then specifically pick out exactly what you want to apply to your life or to your conversation that you want to have with somebody, and then personalize it to you. I feel like that is very very important, right? You don't want to just be spewing out things that you hear. That is something that I've done in the past. I can admit I've done that in the past, but it is something that I've done to help curate the conversation that I want to have and the person that I want to be, right? So I have taken the views of some people, I've internalized them, I've personalized them, and then I've taught them, or not exactly taught them, but I've said them in a way that isn't exactly 100% 100% what somebody else said. I'm not repeating just what somebody else said. Like I said, it's personalized to me personally, right? The exact way that I want to say it, right? So I feel like everyone should be doing that intentionally. Um, Another way to be better at conversation is, like I had mentioned before, is to have the right questions already written up, right? I would recommend everybody that is watching this that if you want to be a better conversationalist, write down questions that get the most out of the interaction. Write down about 3 to 5 questions that you think that you can get the most out of somebody to get to know them, right? So one of these things could be, like I said, what are you passionate about? What are things that you do on your free time? Tell me your relationships with your family, things like that, right? That is going to allow them to speak. And like I had mentioned before, most people like to talk about themselves. So getting them to talk about themselves and also understanding when, let's just say they're talking all about themselves and they have no interest or no questions for you. If they have no interest or questions for you, dead the interaction right there. Because like I had mentioned, they're either not interested or they're just not good at conversation. And either or, you pretty much just don't want to have the conversation with them in general. It's not worth your time. I personally would rather be having a conversation with somebody who's good at conversation and who's interested in having the conversation with me. That's personally how I take it. So that is going to help you with being better at conversation. The next thing is, yeah, like I said, just don't carry the conversation. And I hate carrying conversations, especially with females. I'm not a big fan of that, man. If I'm carrying the conversation, I'm done. I'm done. Honestly, it's goofy. It's goofy. Another piece of my advice that I would recommend is to have conversations with people who are more social than you, and even have conversations with people that are going to be somebody you don't even know, right? Just trying to have that little small talk with somebody is definitely going to go a long way, and is going to allow you to break out of your comfort zone. I feel like a lot of people, if you struggle with speech or if you're shy or whatever identity you attach to yourself, make sure you're attaching good identities to yourself. By the way, do not try to say these things like I said, I'm a shy person. Do not attach yourself to those identities. There's people in the past that probably have given you that identity or told you you're kind of like that, right? But do not attach yourself to those identities because they're not going to suit you best when it comes to social interaction. So begin to say things like, I'm a social person. I'm good at having conversations. Say these things, even if you don't 1,000% believe it's true. Say these things, and eventually, with you putting the work in, it is eventually going to be true. So remove that negative talk. I hate when people say, I'm shy. I always say, you're not shy. You're just not exactly comfortable with yourself yet. And like I said, if you feel some type of way about that, do something about it. Do something about it realistically. But yeah. The next piece of advice that I have to become a better conversationalist is like I had mentioned. I want to get a little bit into this. Is have conversations with people who are better than you at conversation. Try to observe all the things that you possibly can from that interaction, and like I said, try to apply that to your conversations that you have with people as well. So that is what I would recommend. Also, understand social cues, have eye contact, and make sure your body language is not lacking. Appreciate it, my dog. We got to stay consistent out here, man. Come on now. You already know what time it is, man. But understand social cues. Like I said, pay attention to eye contact. If you're not very good and strong with eye contact, that is okay. But just understand that it is something that you need to strengthen because obviously it is a weakness. And I would say most people definitely struggle with maintaining eye contact or keeping eye contact. And that is okay. But it is not okay to stay the same exact way. It is not okay to stay the same exact way. Make the adjustments that you need to make, and go from there. All right. The next piece of advice that I have to become a better conversationalist is to have established beliefs and think outside the conversation a lot. Right. So yeah, some of these steps that I'm going to recommend have to do with just thinking and trying to develop yourself as an individual in general. If you do not have your own opinions, if you don't think social things out thoroughly, it's going to be a lot harder to have conversations with you because you're not exactly opinionated. You don't have a stance, and it's hard to have conversation with people that don't have a stance really. And I personally like to debate, and not exactly debate. I like to have conversations with people who I can maybe debate or maybe agree with, and we can go in deeper into the conversation, right? But it's definitely hard to have a conversation with somebody who's kind of like not exactly affiliated with either side. It's kind of like, what's the point of even having the conversation? But like I said, have established beliefs, and like I said, think a whole lot outside of conversation. And another piece of my advice that I would recommend is also writing. Writing is an extension of thought, and writing is also an extension of eventual speech because you have it written down, you think it out thoroughly, and then it can become something that you speak about later on. So that is definitely something I would recommend. The next piece of advice that I would recommend to become a better conversationalist is, oh, no, I'll mention that one. Yeah, I kind of already mentioned that. Like I said, become better at um, having your opinions and stuff like that, right? Establish things like that. Another piece of my advice, and like I said, I'm kind of just reiterating these pieces of advice. Understand what combos to avoid having with people. Like I said, everybody's gonna have their unpopular opinions, and everyone should have unpopular opinions. And anyone that doesn't have an unpopular opinion, I don't trust you. Quite frankly, I don't trust you. Have unpopular opinions. That's completely fine. Um, Understand that when they're really, really controversial, and most people are going to disagree with you, understand the backlash that can come with it, and understand that maybe sometimes it's better off not even having the conversation if you're trying to be likable, right? And in most interactions, you're trying to be likable, but if you don't give a damn, feel free to have the conversation. Feel free to have the conversation. But if you're specifically trying to be likable, which most people in interactions are trying to be likable, um, I would say steer clear away from conversations that you know have have not got the best response in the past. Yeah, that's what I will say. And then my last piece of advice before I get into the second part of the podcast is going to be being present and being in the moment, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier. Don't be distracted. Make sure you are not wasting your breath on somebody who's, like I said, distracted or not interested within the conversation. It's not worth your time. Be present and in the moment. And if you're present in the moment, you can expect that from the person that you're talking to. You can expect them reasonably to be present in the moment, and that's how you have better conversations in general. So that is going to be my piece of advice. Before I move on to the next part of the podcast, I want you guys to, if you're watching this, leave a like on the video. Also, like my YouTube shorts as well. Follow me on TikTok, Life of a Champ Podcast. I post on there every single week. Also, one thing I want to mention as well: if you have any piece of advice for the people, if you have any certain piece of advice for the people, make sure you go ahead and leave it in the comments, just so I can talk about that before I move on to the next topic. So, like I said, specifically with conversation, how would you recommend somebody to be better at conversation? What are something they can do? What are something that they can apply to have better conversation? What about eye contact? I struggle at keeping eye contact with people because I tend to make them uncomfortable. If I look straight into their eyes, so I tend to be awkward to be talking. Okay, I understand that. That's kind of something that I mentioned a little earlier, but my best advice is you just got to keep doing it, man. You just got to keep doing it, but don't be weird with it. That's I feel like that's something that people will get wrong, right? They don't know they don't know what's too much eye contact. You'll be able to feel when it's too much eye contact, right? But you also be able to feel when it's not enough eye contact, right? You don't want them to subconsciously think that you're insecure, and I feel like that's a misconception that a lot of people can have if you're not able to keep eye contact. And it's not exactly like I said, when it's too much. If you're like, no, it's too much. That's too much. Like I said, you want to have it, talk about it a little bit, and then kind of look away, come back to it, right? You don't want to overdo it because, like I said, a lot of people, you don't want to be a creep, man. Don't overdo it, man. Don't overdo it. But yeah, that's something that's going to come in time and with practice. And I'm not saying I'm the best person. I'm saying that's what I would recommend, right? I'm not the best with it, but with people that I'm comfortable with, they observe that I can make eye contact, and yeah, it is definitely a social skill that is definitely very, very much underrated, and a lot of people need to work on it, and a lot of people struggle with it. But like I said, do not intentionally try to work on it. But I'll answer Katie's question. He said, "How was the Jordan P. Peterson seminar yesterday?" It was a very, very good time. Let me tell you that. Um, I was definitely one of the youngest people there. Not many people are my age that consume his content, let alone consume his content and actually would go to his seminar or something like that. It's what it was his book tour. It's called Beyond Order: The 10 More Rules for Life. I have it right there. Can't really see it too well, but I have it right there because I decided to do that for the podcast. But yeah, it was a great time. It was definitely an interesting experience. I definitely felt like I was in my element. I read two of his books and been consuming his content for almost 5 years now, so I definitely think it was long overdue. Um, but yeah, it was definitely a great time, and I would definitely recommend anybody to go see him or even experience something very similar to that for sure. Um, it's interesting to observe somebody with speech as well. Kind of the advice that I gave is something that I did yesterday, right? There's certain things that I seen within his speech that were very, very good, and I'll talk about them right now as I get into speech. But one thing that I observed from him is he's very animated with his speech. So he uses his hands a lot. He talks like this, but he does a lot of different things, right? He does a lot of different things that I don't do. But he has that. Another one is what else did he do? He took reasonable pauses that weren't awkward, right? I feel like a lot of people they think that they're in a rush. Most people are not in a rush when it comes to conversation. So you can slow down your speech, which is something I'm going to mention. But he had reasonable pauses as well. And where let me see, let me pull it up. I took some notes, thankfully. He also gauged the audience very, very well, which is something that I can't exactly do right here, because I can't see you guys. But he also gauges the audience really, really well. He can see when they're kind of like lacking attention. The entire point of being able to speak on a stage like that is to be able to grip people's attention and being able to lighten the mood up a little bit when he feels it to be a little bit of an awkward tension. So he'll try to say something that is funny, or he'll end something a certain way to try to get people's attention. But yeah, it was definitely a great time. Like I said, I recommend anybody to go see him or just to go see a seminar where somebody speaks. It's definitely a really, really great experience. And like I said, for me, fantastic experience. I would definitely do it again. He said, I can keep a convo, but I struggle at showing interest in conversation. That might be the person you're dealing with, my dog. That might be the person you're dealing with. A lot of people, like I said, they suck at conversation. They really do. A lot of people, I've met very, very few people where I'm like, man, this person's actually really good at making conversation. Most people suck at it. If you struggle with showing interest, you just need to talk to somebody else, in my opinion. I instantly look at people that they think that I'm trying to be on one, but no one understands. I'm like, hey, like I said, hey, it happens, man. It happens, man. What I will say to that is, like I said, you just gotta know when you're not overdoing it, man. Because like I said, it's very easy for people to view you overdoing it, but or even saying that, man. I'm blind, man. Come on, now. Give me a break, man. Give me a break, man. Let them know that. That'll definitely help you out, right? All right, so we're gonna get into the second part of the podcast. Let me get some water real quick. But also, like I had mentioned, if you view something that would make somebody better at conversation, make sure to leave in the comments. Also, before I get it started, if there's anything specifically you think would help somebody out with their speech, leave it in the comments as well. I'm about to go over what I think would help somebody out when it comes to improving their speech. But give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So the second part of the podcast, this is how to become better with speech. One thing I want to start it off with is this. Most people suck at speech. I'm going to be completely honest. Most people suck at speech. Most people do not try to intentionally learn about speech. They're not observant enough to learn about speech. And if you're one of these people, I would recommend you do this because it is going to go a long way. Being able to be very articulate with speech is one of the most important skills that exists within this world. And yes, I said that exactly the way I said it. Articulated speech is one of the most valuable things you can have as a person because you're going to be able to talk in a way that is going to be able to get the most out of life. And if you're not able to portray yourself exactly the way you need to portray yourself in certain situations, you're going to feel a lack of fulfillment, quite frankly. And that is something that I've observed, right? If I'm not able to, speak for myself in certain situations, I'm going to be lacking, potentially lacking when I could be having the more fulfilled interaction. This goes hand in hand with, like, let's just say something happens and you need help. You need help finding something. Or like I said, you're in a store, right? You need help finding something. If you're not able to speak for yourself, you're just going to struggle a little bit longer. You're going to have a little bit extra suffering when it's not necessary. But if you're able to speak up for yourself, right? I feel like that's very, very important as well. But yeah, most people don't know how to speak, quite frankly. I'm gonna say that because it sounds funny and it sounds goofy. It sounds really goofy, honestly. If I say most people don't know how to speak, you're like, what are you talking about, champ? People know how to talk. knowing how to talk is one thing, but knowing how to speak is a completely different thing, right? Um, yeah, people need to really take the time to learn how to really speak, learn about what it takes to become a great speaker. Because, like I mentioned, right, the people who get the most out of life are the people who are able to speak the best and portray exactly what they're thinking, as well as people who are able to ask the most intense questions. Those people get the most out of life, in my opinion, through my observations. So one thing that's going to help you with your speech and not only gripping people's attention, but just like I said, speech in general is going to be more being more passionate with your speech and what you choose to believe in. Right? I feel like anybody that has an opinion, you should be very, very passionate with the opinion that you have because for whatever reason you chose to have that, you chose to choose that side instead of another one. Right? So being more passionate is definitely going to help you improve your speech because people are going to be able to feel you, and that's different. People can hear you, but people can feel what you're saying. That is going to get a completely different reaction, and I feel like that is something that not a lot of people emphasize too much. And if you are watching this, hopefully I'm a person who sounds passionate about what they're speaking in because, like I said, I don't do this. I don't just do this just to do this, man. I do this to have a good time, and I do this because, like I said, this is something that I'm personally passionate about. So, being passionate is um, definitely great when it comes to being able to better your speech. They should be trying to incorporate a public speaking class in high school that is required to take. I 1 trillion% agree with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Um, and I would say they should probably push that a little bit more than what it is. Obviously, they don't really have it. I never took one in my classes, but I feel like the way that they portray that, I'll get into that a little bit, right? A lot of people get their speech ruined by trying to perform in class, right? Trying to present something, right? Me personally, I'll speak for myself. I absolutely fucking hated speaking. Public speaking in class was absolutely terrible for me. I hated it very, very much because I felt uncomfortable, right? But pushing somebody to do that is one thing, right? But letting them be comfortable enough to do that is a whole other thing. And what it comes down to is this: when it comes to presenting and public speaking, is this is some advice that I observed for myself, and this is some advice that I got from Jordan Peterson himself through watching his videos. Is you need to understand a lot more about what you're going to speak on than what you're actually going to speak. So he said, understand or think about 3 to 4 times the amount that you're going to speak. So you can kind of have a reservoir of different conversations you can bring up or stories you can bring up. That is definitely going to be very, very helpful when it comes to public speaking because at the end of the day, what it comes down to is most people aren't comfortable, and that's how you're going to be able to provide a source of comfort is being able to be knowledgeable about what you're going to speak on. And like I said, most people just they're thinking about different things. And yeah, that is also I'll bring that up. Right, something that I learned from that seminar was to be in the moment when it comes to speaking. Right, if you're observing the way you speak and you become self conscious of certain things, it's going to hinder you. It really is going to hinder you because you're not exactly in the moment, right? I'm like for example, right? Let's just say that for example, I'm thinking about right now what I'm speaking about, right? Just me doing that right there is going to trigger something, and it's not exactly going to be great for my conversation, right? So just being in the moment and not thinking about your unconscious insecurities and things like that. If you can be in the moment and disregard some of the insecurities that you have, or disregard some of the people and the way that they react to what you're saying, it is going to allow you to become better at speaking because, like I said, you're not going to entertain things that don't exactly need to be entertained in the moment. All right. Another piece of advice that I would recommend to help your speech is going to be something that I kind of already mentioned, right? Consume content intentionally and try to apply what you learn. Um, this is going to be specifically on speaking, right? I feel like everyone should take the time to learn about speaking, like I had mentioned, but strategically consume content that is going to help you with your speech. And I'm not saying you should be studying this every week, studying this every day. I'm saying, hey, when you want to get better at speech, have a random impulse about speech, definitely go forward with it. And like me, for example, right? Every so often I look up maybe like I spend maybe 15, 20 minutes trying to watch some videos on trying to how to speak better because that is something that I obviously do, and I definitely want to get better at it. And everyone should realistically should try to get better at it because, like I said, most people lack the skill, and it is most definitely a skill for sure. So, like I said, consume content intentionally and try to apply it to your life for sure. All right. become painfully aware. Okay. So one thing I want to recommend as well. This is going to help you with your speech, because it is going to be something that I kind of mentioned, right? This is going to be understand your insecurities and understand your insufficiencies and become very painfully aware of them and understand that you need to go ahead and correct them and change them because they need to be changed, right? So there's certain things that I used to say within, me speaking on this podcast that I definitely needed to remove because it wasn't exactly conducive to a great listening experience. So with that being said, there's certain words, certain phrases that you should stay away from. Of course, I have my certain phrases that I definitely can't stay away from, sadly. But with that being said, just getting rid of the ums and things like that. Like I said, I'm not a professional out here, right? I'm just gonna give you the advice that I would take, right? I'm not, like I said, I'm not the best. I'm not the best, and I don't claim to be the best. I'm trying to get better every single day. But yeah, that is definitely something I would recommend. Is trying to get rid of those words and to try to get rid of phrases that you kind of observe. And another thing with speaking as well, this is something that I would recommend as an exercise if you want to take this piece of advice. If you don't take anything for the rest of this podcast, this is something that I would recommend you take. Is to film yourself speaking, right? Or it doesn't even exactly have to be like you filming a video of yourself. It can be just the audio. You can just hear yourself out, right? To hear how you're speaking, hear how you develop your thought. And being able to speak is going to help you develop your thoughts in general because it's all on the fly. And like I said, maybe you're not going to be the best at it at first, and don't expect to be the best at anything at first. But just understand that you are going to try to intentionally get better at it every single day. And that is definitely going to be something that is going to reap you a lot of benefits. And that's something that I had to do initially before even starting this podcast, is to try to get comfortable with speaking in general, speaking for a long period of time. And my recommendation is this: get a topic. So, like I said, if you don't want to see yourself talk, just record your audio. I would recommend you picking a topic, speaking on it for as long as you possibly can without switching the topic up. So let's just say, for example, I'm speaking about my passion of sports. I'll start speaking of, like, let's just say about basketball and football, right? So I'll go for as long as I possibly can without stopping. And the more you're able to do that without exactly thinking about anything else, the better your speech is going to be. The more developed your mind is going to be because your thoughts are going to be a lot more sufficient. And like I said, it's something that, like I said, you could take to anything. You can realistically take that to anything. That is something that I've improved with drastically with this podcast, is taking a topic, being able to talk as much as I possibly can about it and extend that every single time. It is something that I've practiced and definitely something that I've improved on drastically. If you go back to the previous podcasts that I've done in the past, either the podcast wasn't exactly planned out the best or I just didn't have that much to say. But speaking on these things definitely helps you develop your speech. So that's something I would recommend. All right, the next thing I would recommend to help you better your speech is going to be, um, hmm, I already mentioned that. Mentioned that as well. Slow down your speech. Like I said, slow it down, right? Like I said, nobody's in a rush now. Slow it down because you don't want to be rushing, right? Everyone can pretty much take the time to hear you. Of course, you want to captivate somebody's attention, but you don't exactly have to do that in the fastest way possible. People are completely okay with some breaks in speech, and if they're not okay, their entire attention span is absolutely warped, and that's a them problem, not a you problem, right? Being able to, like I said, take those certain breaks, and not to do awkward long pauses, but to just have certain breaks in your speech is definitely going to help you, because it'll allow you to be a little bit more comfortable and it'll allow you to process your thoughts a little bit more thoroughly. And like I said, it'll keep you from thinking that you're in a rush because, like I said, most of the time you're not in a rush. All right. Next piece of advice that I would recommend is going to be inclusive with your audience. So let's just say, for example, me right here. The way I could be inclusive with my audience is going to be something like this. I could talk about the we's. I could talk about you. I could say certain things like that. That's going to make them feel more inclusive within the interaction. So this, for example, let's just say you're speaking to a group of people. Let's just say you're speaking to a group of family members and you want to captivate their attention. The way you would do this is to say those certain things, like either single out people, like saying like you, or saying we. So make everyone feel like they're a part of what you're speaking about. And the more you're able to do that, that's going to be better with just making your conversation more captivating. And I feel like with speaking, everyone should be trying to be captivating with their speech. And whether you're conscious of it or not, everyone's trying to be, you know, have gripping and compelling speech. Because if you don't have that, like I said, people just don't want to listen to you, right? So that is definitely something I would recommend as well. All right, another thing I wanted to mention, this is kind of related, is like I had mentioned, people are very, very poorly at it, verbally expressing themselves or speaking, right? With that being said, I feel like a lot of people's opinions and a lot of people's messages get lost in translation because they're not able to portray it the best way that they possibly can. So, like, I would say, for example, right, let's say Kanye West, I don't think his message is getting through thoroughly enough because I don't think he's the best speaker. Like I had mentioned, I'm not the best speaker. Would I say I'm better than him? I don't even know if I'm better than him or not. But what I will say is it's very easy for your message to get misconstrued if you're not the best speaker. But if you are a great speaker, you're able to correct yourself and be able to correct people's misconceptions about you. And I feel like that is very, very important when it comes to speaking because if people are taking what you say out of context, you're able to correct them. And if you're not able to correct them, like I said, then they're going to have different types of narratives come out about you that aren't exactly going to be true. And I feel like that's very hindering to not only the perception of one person, but that could be potentially hindering to the perception of thousands of people because of one person's misconception of you. So that is definitely something I would recommend. Like I said, people lack their ability to verbalize their thoughts. It's one thing to think a thought, it's another thing to speak on the thought, right? A lot of people are not very good at that. And like I said, the better you are with it, the more you're going to be more interesting, the more understanding, right? So that is definitely something that I would recommend. Like another thing I want to mention is also with writing. Like I said, writing is an extension of thought, and eventually going to be an extension of speech because it is just putting down thoughts on a paper, and you can kind of get to see that, right? You see it, you write it, you think it. You're doing a bunch of different things that's going to help you make that thought become concrete in your mind, and you're going to be able to portray that in speech later on. Yeah, so that is going to be my advice for the day. Yeah, I pretty much said everything that I wanted to say in this podcast. So if you have any last second pieces of advice for people that struggle with speech or conversation, make sure you go and leave it in the comments, just so I can get the people the most game that they possibly can. Also, if you're rewatching this, make sure you go and leave a like if you had liked a certain point. Make sure you go and leave a comment regarding that point that you liked. Like I had mentioned, make sure you follow me on TikTok, Life of a Champ Podcast, as well as make sure you like my YouTube Shorts, and make sure you subscribe if you're watching this for the first time. I go live every single Tuesday and Thursday. Not this week, but Tuesdays and Thursdays are usually the days that I go live. I go live at 7 o'clock or 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, so make sure you go ahead and tap in with that for sure. But yeah, I'll wait for the comments, and then I'll go ahead and end it off. Also, one thing I want to mention as well. If you guys couldn't tell, I'm growing out my facial hair a little bit. It's not something that I've done before, but I'm like, what is it? 8 days, 9 days in? 9 days in? This is as long as it's ever grown out. I'd never let it grow out past 5 days, ever. So I'm going to look a little different, and this month is going to be a little bit more different than the previous months, but I'm just going to see how I like it. If I like it, then I'll keep it. Which odds is I'm not going to keep it, but if I like it, I'll keep it. If I don't like it, then I'm just going to get rid of it at the end of November, so. I decided it'd be interesting to change it up a little bit. If you like my facial hair, let me know. If you don't like it, let me know. Be honest. I do not want anybody to lie to me, right? Everybody's response as of recently to my facial hair has been nothing but positive, but I don't know if I exactly believe you guys because you guys are supposed to say it looks good on me, because if you don't, then I'm like, wow, damn, that's crazy. To get better at speaking, just start talking to random people or in front of a crowd. It might be awkward at first, but if you keep doing it, your speech will get better. That's 100%. That's 100% exactly right. Yeah, a lot of people are not. They let their insecurities and let their insufficiencies really control them and control the life that they have. And you cannot let your insufficiencies and your insecurities control you, because if they control you, they're pretty much dictating your life. And if you want something more for your life, then, like I said, to be controlled by insecurities and insufficiencies, which you should. If you do, then, like I said, you need to do something about that, because I just don't understand why people they recognize that they lack something and then they just don't try to help themselves. I don't understand that. I've never understood that when people lack something. It's not something that I do personally. So, yeah. like I said, if you're in here right now, make sure you go and leave a like. Also, like I mentioned, I appreciate KJ for the comment to help people's speech. Also, another piece of advice that I would recommend with speech and being better at conversation. This is going to be something it's very uncomfortable, but like I said, with speech and trying to get better at anything, initially it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay, right? That's just life. Also, if you're a man, go ahead and speak to women. Go ahead and try to speak to women in public. Now you might get denied, but here's the thing: you don't. If you go into the interaction not having any expectations of where it's going to go, you're probably going to be better off. So let's just say people. The reason why most men are scared to have conversations with women is because they have a fear of rejection. But if you give her really nothing to reject, the conversation is different. Now, if you enjoy the conversation and the conversation the conversation becomes more favorable in your favor, right? Then you can go ahead and ask for her number, and it would be less weird. But if you go into the interaction with not even having the intention of trying to attract her or anything like that, then it's going to be a little bit more casual. You're going to be a little bit more in yourself, and you're going to be a little bit more comfortable, which is ideal. But yeah, that's something I would recommend. If you're a woman watching this, I would definitely recommend you going up to men or going up to other women and trying to create conversation and just become more friendly. I feel like that's going to help you develop your character a little bit more, for sure. Also, if you're a woman going up to men, I praise you because, quite frankly, that is such a rare thing that most men would really appreciate if you just came up to them. Yeah, like I said, you don't even have to ask them out. Just have conversation with them. You're gonna pique their interest because most girls do not come up to guys. Like I would say, like maybe like 2% of women actually go up to guys and have conversations with them. So that is something I would recommend because, like I said, most guys don't get that. So go ahead and do that if you are a woman watching this. Other than that, fellas, I'm going to go ahead and end it off. I appreciate everyone for stopping by. This was the Life of a Champ podcast, episode number 54, talking about how to become a better conversationalist as well as how to become better with your speech. So like I said, if you're rewatching this, make sure you go ahead and leave a like. Other than that, fellas, one more thing I want to leave you guys off on is this. This is the motto, baby. This is the motto. Fellas, we don't just work out here, we outwork. So make sure you outworking these motherfuckers every single day. Because, like I said, they just need to get outworked, man. Simple as that. When you're putting the work in, make sure you outworking these people, man. Come on now. All right. Next podcast is going to be on. Next podcast is going to be on next Tuesday, so make sure you stay tuned in for that. Tuesday's podcast is going to be the Champ Commandments. This is going to be everything that I believe in, and everything. Yeah, pretty much everything I believe in, everything that I have affinity to. So make sure you stay tuned in for that. But other than that, fellas, like I said, make sure y'all working these motherfuckers. Yeah, you guys have a good rest of your night.